Get everybody going. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's good to see everybody, man. I appreciate you guys coming in. I didn't know I was going to be able to do a broadcast today, but having the ability to a little bit of time and a little bit of break. I was on my property yesterday, and it's very high elevation and a lot of sun. So I have to drink a lot of water, and I can feel that elevation. It's 8,500 feet. What is that? 2,700 meters, something like this. And when you're up there that high, it's going to take me about a week or 10 days just to acclimate to that elevation. But it's a good time. We have a lot of plans. John was just asking about how the place is coming along. And at the end of the day, we actually haven't even started building yet, but we have another place that's a half a mile from our property, and we're going to live there while we build out our property on our 12 acres. So I think I'm going to do some broadcasts from up there. I don't know how much photo-related stuff we'll do, but we can. I mean, obviously we can. I'm supposed to have this Rise broadband connection up there. We'll see how it goes. It's supposed to be 15 to 20 megabits download, but I'm going to be very rural. I'll be a few miles off any paved road, and I'll be on top of a mountain. So, which is both good and bad internet wise. It's a line of sight. So we'll see what happens. I don't know until we get there. So anyway, welcome everybody. See, I'm still suffering from yesterday. It's a great day here. We're almost finished. It's been a long struggle to get out of here. I never want to move again in my life. I'll tell you that much. It interferes. I've never been divorced, but I hear divorce, moving, and death are all similar. So I know I'll experience at least one of those, death, but yeah, I don't want to do this again. And we've only lived here 6 years, which is amazing to me in this house. But man, the crap you accumulate. Wow. It's just, anyway, we're almost out of here. This will probably be my last broadcast for a little bit, but who knows? Maybe I'll get up there and I'll feel like jumping on here and maybe we can chat. John just mentioned something about, and I think this is a great idea. We've done this in the past. I've been doing these for years, but we've done this in the past where people will come on and share some of their processes and some of their work, regardless of what it is. And we've done a little bit of that, and it's not so strict as a wet collodion kind of thing. I mean, most people want to talk about that, and we surely can. But I think it's a great idea to bring people on and share some work and share some ideas and processes, technical, whatever we want to do. So think about that. And while my studio won't be up for a while, it's packed in a container out here, or half of it's gone, the other half is going. So I won't have a studio for a while, or a darkroom for a while. So I won't be able to do anything, but we can surely meet up, and those that are working and can show work and have a conversation. I'd love to facilitate that and be a part of that. So think about that. If you guys want to do that, I know by the end of this month, I'll be back up and going. It may be a little bit of a break for a couple of weeks, but I'd be happy to entertain that. So if we want to do something like that over the summer, I'd definitely take an hour or two out a weekend. So think about that. That's a great idea. And thanks for sharing that. So welcome. And I'm glad you're here with me for the last one here in this location anyway. And I know Michelle, hello. He just wrote me, and there's a couple of emails that I want to address, and I just got this one from him just a few minutes ago. He was asking about, hey, good morning, Paul. Good morning, Phil. Good afternoon, Phil. Herr Ketterman, Karsten, guten Tag. Samuel, yes. Yeah. Samuel says you could even live stream while you're working on your house and talk on the side. Yeah. I don't know how interesting that would be, but I will show you guys the property. If you've never been in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, that would be unfortunate. But if you haven't, make plans to visit, because man, our property is like a national park. It is absolutely gorgeous. We're in central western Colorado on top of a mountain, and it is gorgeous. But I'll definitely show you the property. I'll show you some of the maybe every once in a while we'll go through. I'll show you what we're doing, and You'll start seeing the studio built. I'm going to have a north-lit studio and a dark room, and then a forging area and a little shop and things. It's not huge. I don't want it huge. I want it manageable and built the way it functions. So I'll walk you guys through that. That's a great idea. But hello, Thilo and Sam and Phil, everybody. Welcome, welcome. So we talked about the Rollins oil print quite a bit in a couple of these sessions in the past. And Michelle asked about density, about printing oil prints and collodion chloride or collodion aristotype prints and density and negatives. And what I usually say about this is oil prints are very, very forgiving. They can accept a wide range of density and negatives, unlike an albumin or a salt print. There's one of these old manuals. I forget. John might know what it is. Maybe John even sent it to me. He talks about, maybe it was bromoil, but he talks about inking up prints, and he talks about a good oil printer can work with a very thin negative or a very dense negative, and it's the inking up part. If you get the good relief, the good matrix as we call it, after you print out on the gelatin. And your technique of inking out is really what determines. I've actually had bright ambrotypes ink up beautifully on Rollins oil print. And when I talk about bright ambrotypes, I'm talking about a density, a Dmax range of like 1.1, 1.2, where you'd want the Dmax range on a salt or albumin print, maybe 1.8 or 1.9. That's a lot of density difference. So to answer your question, you can use any. But generally speaking, the old literature will tell you that a more dense negative, a strong negative, a robust negative is what they call it, will print better on oil. And it will. It'll give you a better relief if you're new at it and you're playing with exposure times and washing the dichromate out and swelling the gelatin. A denser negative, a higher contrast negative will give you a better relief or a better matrix for inking up. But both will work. Don't be discouraged as you go along and you start making oil prints, that if you work with dense negatives in the beginning and you have a bright ambrotype or a thinner negative, whatever medium it is, don't be surprised if you get good at inking up, you can make those work as well too. I know one of the first things that I'm going to do when I get set back up is I'm going to continue with making glass oil prints, inking glass, doing oil prints on glass. I just absolutely fell in love with that right as I was starting to pack up and move my studio out. I just absolutely fell in love with that. I'd love to do a whole series of work just on glass and Rollins oil printing. I think that would just be absolutely gorgeous and stunning. But they all work. It's a wide variety, and I do recommend. Michelle also asked about pyro redevelopment. And we talked a little bit about this last week, I believe it was, about the difference between intensification and redevelopment. And we talked a little bit about intensification as a different methodology on building density in the negative. So redevelopment and intensification takes a bright ambrotype, if you will, and you turn it into a proper negative, or a negative that's dense enough to print out on contact or printing out paper. And what the intensification process is you bleach it with copper sulfate and bromide. You bleach the silver out. Basically, you prepare it to take on a silver nitrate, more silver nitrate, and you bleach it out, and then you throw it in a pan of 8 to 15% silver nitrate, and it'll build that silver up. So, and you can do it as mild or as strong as you want. Redevelopment is rehalogenating the silver on there with a weak solution of iodine, washing that off, the excess off, and then exposing it to a little light if you want. That'll build a lot of density right off the bat. And then using pyrogallic acid and a few drops of silver nitrate. That's redevelopment. You have a lot more control with redevelopment than you do with intensification. Intensification, you just drop the plate in and it builds density. So those are two ways of doing it. You can choose which way you like to work with it. But I do recommend people try to have negatives that are proper for build or printing out and a proper density for the type of printing out process you want to use. Again, the salt and the albumin would be in the higher Dmax range, you know, the 1.6, 1.7 to 2 or even 2.1. And the colloidal chloride, oil printing, those kinds of things, even some to some degree carbon, some pigment prints, they will accept a wider variety and less dense, like bright ambrotypes. And you take bright ambrotypes, they'll print well on modern developing out paper, contact printed or enlarged, enlarging paper, the developing out paper. Thinner bright ambrotypes work well, either contact or put in enlarger. So there's a lot of variety there, but density is important. And as you play with this, you'll see how that density plays a role in what type of print you can produce. So I hope that answers. I hope that helps. And then I see Samuel in here. He wrote me, I think it was today or yesterday. I'm losing track of days now. He talked about asking about ferrous sulfate, and he wanted to see what a diagram or an illustration chemically that would look the heptahydrate versus the non-heptahydrate, the old ferrous sulfate. So hepta means 7. So hepta means you have 7 water molecules on that iron. And what that does in lay terms, if any of you have ever used that old dirty ferrous sulfate, it used to be we had to filter our developer as well as our, you know, collodion, and if we get messy. But developer had varnish. I was thinking of varnish. But developer had to be filtered before you could use it, because that old ferrous sulfate was so dirty. You'd have comets all over your plate. It'd be mucky and nasty. But the heptahydrate, that clean kind of bright green, has more water molecules on it and makes it's cleaner. It's lighter, it's cleaner, and you don't have to filter your developer. You don't have any sediment. That old dirty stuff I used for years and years and years, and I hated having to filter the developer. And you'd let it sit for a day and you get that buildup, just like varnish. It'd be just like varnish. So that extra water molecule helps a lot. And we just chatted a little bit about what that would look like in a diagram. So you've got iron, oxygen, and water making that compound up. And it's interesting, if you look at the CAS number on the iron that I recommend, it is a heptahydrate, but I've seen ferrous sulfate heptahydrate go as large as 11 water molecules on the diagram. So as long as it's heptahydrate, as long as you have a minimum of 7, you're going to have really clean ferrous sulfate. And unless you're buying maybe like a fertilizer, like a lawn or plant garden fertilizer, I don't think you're going to see that dirty stuff anymore. I know Mike at Art Craft and Chem Savers and the places we buy our chemistry from, I don't even think they carry that stuff anymore. So, so Sam says, by the way, I made a test if I have CDBR2 in my body just as a routine check. Still waiting. Oh, good. Yeah, that's another good point. He just said he's had a blood test. And if you're working with cadmium, and I've said this often, it's kind of part of the safety speech, if you will, the safety lecture. I've said this often, if you're handling cadmium, and if you don't want to, I always say don't handle it. If you don't like ether, if you don't like cadmium, or additional ether, I should say, because you've got a lot of ether in the collodion. The majority of the collodion is ether. That's the highest percentage of the total assay. But if you don't like handling additional ether, or handling cadmium, that's fine. Don't handle it. That's fine. But if you are using cadmium in your collodion, I recommend every year or maybe every 2 years, depending on how much you're working in it, when you have a blood test done, have them put in the panel, have them put in heavy metals, specifically cadmium, and see if you're getting any exposure. And that's all an aerosol-based exposure. So if you have problems, you know, when you're mixing your chemistry, it's going to show up in your blood. If you're a cigarette smoker, there's cadmium in cigarettes, so there's got to be a little balance there. But if you're exposed to some of these chemicals, cadmium will show up, mercury will show up in your blood, and a liver test will tell you a fatty liver or a plugged up liver, if you will show you your ether exposure. Ether will really wreak havoc on your liver. So you want to keep those things in balance. So keep us updated on that, Samuel. Let us know what your cadmium tests are. I've always been 0. I had mercury done for a long time when I was working in daguerreotypes. No mercury. I had less mercury in my blood, or no mercury. People that eat tuna fish, a lot of tuna fish, will have a higher mercury level. People who are cigarette smokers will have a certain amount of cadmium in their blood. Urine tests work better for cadmium. Yes, yeah, expulsion. The problem with the urine test versus the blood test is you're getting the urine test may say, and I heard a medical doctor talking about this. A urine test actually filters. You're already filtered, right? So if cadmium shows up in your urine, you're going to probably have a higher amount in your blood. Blood tests they're always the best. Like, your blood is what you got going on in your body. Nothing's filtered through your kidneys or liver or any of that. So and I'm not a medical doctor. I'm just saying what I've experienced. So just as a caveat, right? But I encourage you to get a blood panel work done if you're handling cadmium. If you're working around ether, you definitely want to stay checked out. Nobody wants to see anybody get sick or get, and over the years, I've heard stories. I won't even repeat them because they're just stories. I have no empirical evidence for them. But I've heard stories about people working in collodion that got sick. I know of a couple of people personally that got sick, both liver problems and cancer, both. And it's not child's play. It's pretty dangerous that way. So test yourself out, just like Samuel said. Just ask the next time you do a physical to have your blood work done. Paul says, I used copper intensification, found it satisfactory, but redevelopment was iodine. I agree, Paul. I totally agree with that statement. Back to redevelopment or iodine. I think the reason for intensification, you can either go overboard or you're not quite strong enough. You don't bleach the silver through. If your silver solution isn't strong enough for that particular negative, you can have some iridescent stuff come up. You can have some problems with that depending on your methodology. But I said this last time, the reason I don't even mention intensification anymore in any of my literature or anything is that silver nitrate is so expensive. And now you've got another bath of silver nitrate that you've got to maintain and pay for. And really, you wouldn't want to go less than 10 or 12%. That would be kind of the weak, 100 to 120 grams a liter. That would be the weaker solution for intensifying a negative. So I mention that. And on top, what Paul just said, I think it's a better redevelopment is a better way to go for both the bang for your buck, the cost of it, the methodology, and it's just less equipment. It's just fewer items you have to deal with. What's the downside? You're handling pyrogallic acid. That's the downside. And pyrogallic acid is another one of those chemicals, kind of like selenium, toning, and things that they're toxic chemicals, right? I mean, we all know this. Everything's kind of toxic, but redevelopment's important, and try them both. If you can afford and you have the time to do it, try similar and try them both. Oh, Paul says that was using ferrous sulfate, not pyro. Good, yes. Ferrous sulfate, great. And if you jump to that next level, Paul, and use pyro, you'd really be blown away. In fact, I increase my pyro from one gram to four to 6 grams in a liter. So I'm jumping way up there. So I can do like what I call cups, 40 mils cups. I can do a couple of cups on a negative and be finished because that stuff is so strong, it stains and works that hard. I mean, if you know that you've got good clear void areas in that negative that you want to redevelop, and you don't have any unexposed silver that's developed, and it's pure glass, you can see that. Crank that pyro content up a little bit in your redeveloper. It'll go quicker, it'll build up faster and stain faster, and you'll be really amazed with the results. I've played with redevelopment for several years now, and I've got a method down that I just like. I've said this before, but I redevelop every single negative. Even if I come out of the camera, nail the exposure, I'll just do 1 cup. It just crisps up and sharpens everything and punches that. I'd go from, like, if I had a highlight on a foundation or Dmax on a foundation negative of 1.75, 1.8. If I do one cup on it, I can get it to 1.9, 1.95. Just a little bit, right? Just punching that up just a little bit. And then I'm open for all kinds of my prints, any kind of printing out that I want to do. But check it out. And I'm not going to diss intensification. Some people find that very, very plausible and works very well for them. So very good. I like that. I got an 8x10 negative done this way last week and made a Van Dyke print almost look like a platinum print. Yeah, excellent. Very good. Yeah, once you get into negative making and you're physically there in the place that you're working and you see the results, I mean, the web is great, but it's just not going to give you what people are getting with good negatives as far as prints go. If you could see them in real life, they are astonishing. I mean, they are just absolutely gorgeous. So keep working on those for sure. What else do we have here? Hello, Drew. Hello, Konstantinos. Welcome, welcome, welcome. What else did I have? We have, I think those were the two. Yeah, we talked about both of those. Let me see if we have any questions over here. You guys got a question or you want to talk about something? Shoot, let's open this up. I hope the echoing darkroom behind me isn't too bad.
Hey, Quinn, I got a funny question for you real quick.
Please.
Do you know what ammonium nitrate is used for in photography?
Ammonium nitrate?
Yeah.
The fertilizer?
Uh-huh.
The one that goes bang, bang, boom, boom?
That's
ammonium nitrate. I have never used that. No, I don't.
Okay. That's $110 I spent on something I don't know why. I'm ordering away all kinds of crap, and I just wind up with stuff. It just shows up. I'm like, okay.
Put it out to the panel. Anybody know what ammonium nitrate is used for? I know they cracked down hard on it after Timothy McVeigh in Oklahoma City here in the States. I don't know what. I don't know what. Anybody know what they use it for? Ammonium nitrate. I've never used it personally.
Maybe I can do something kind of artsy, make a nice pretty plate, throw it on there, and smack it with a hammer or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I hope.
Right. Okay.
I hope it doesn't create fulminates, but yeah, be careful. Yeah.
My joke's over. I'll hand it back.
I used to strong lit developer black. What do you mean by that, Boguslav? Tell us about that. What do you mean there? Are you talking about ammonium nitrate? Tell us what you use it for. I've never used it, so I don't know anything about it, to be honest with you.
Yes, I believe to special black and white paper developer, lit technology.
Oh, okay.
It is increased much stronger, work very quick. It's a very cheap accelerator.
I got it. I got it. That does make sense. I get that. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
10 and 50 grams per liter developer is enough.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like a pyro then. It's kind of like a intensifier. Yeah, that makes sense.
A strong developer is 45 hydroquinone, calcium bromide, and this is 3 parts is enough. The very strong developer.
Okay, good to know. Thank you for sharing that. That's good. I had no idea. That's good to know. Yeah.
In the 60s, in the 70s, it was used to lithography process.
Okay,
to develop with black and white cliché.
That makes sense. Yes, that makes sense. I got you. So anytime you have NH4 ammonium, anytime you see that specification, and then for in positives or negatives, both in wet collodion, NH4I, ammonium iodide, you're going to have a stronger release than like an ammonium bromide, potassium bromide. That's a better example. Ki versus NH4I. That makes sense using the nitrate portion in that kind of super strong developer aspect. Again, I'm just speaking off the cuff. I've never used it, but in my mind is what Bogoslav just said. As I roll it around, I could see where that would be the case. I've never even seen it for sale. I didn't even know you could get that. I thought they put the kibosh on it, but that sounds very expensive for 500 grams or whatever you have there. It's not much. Interesting. That's very good.
30 grams.
What's that?
Yeah, it's only 30 grams.
Oh, 30 grams.
Yeah.
Oh,
but that's the lab grade stuff. That's from home science. Home science, something like that. Yeah. Oh, home science tools.
Okay.
Yeah, out of Billings, Montana.
Interesting.
The Prilled laboratory grade.
Lab grade. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So
yeah. I don't think you could do much damage with 30 grams though. So that's interesting. Yeah. And Michelle says zeotypes, and I printed zeotypes with collodion. They're beautiful. Zeotypes use ferric ammonium oxalate. Yes. True story. True story. Yeah. Excellent. Very good. Drew says, could you comment on the way that different collodion formulas allow for better pore visibility during development by inspection? What chemical or part of the process is responsible for providing better visibility? That's an interesting question, Drew. When we talk about, and we'll talk about it in the positive, making ambrotypes or tintypes here. When we talk about pouring a plate, the collodion, meaning it's not really the collodion, it's what salts you're using in the collodion that differentiates what type it is. For the most part, generally speaking, there's not a huge difference visually. With the NH4I, the ammonium iodide versus the potassium iodide, you're going to get two things. The potassium iodide is going to give you a longer shelf life, meaning it won't oxidize or break down and turn red or orange as fast. And you will lack a little bit of contrast in that, or tonal, not tonal range, but contrast. You'll have faster speeds, quote unquote, ISO, ASA speeds. But on the other side, the NH4I or the ammonium iodide in the collodion will increase contrast, but slower your ISO or ASA or your speeds. So iodide is prevalently or known for speed and contrast. And in the beginning, this one applies to the Ki and the other applies to the NH4I. What you'll notice is if you use NH4I in the collodion and you do proper exposure, you sensitize the plate, everything's the same, and you pour your iron developer on it, that iron developer goes on and reduces those iodides, or that those halogen, AgI, silver iodide, it's converted to in its bath. It'll reduce it to the pure metallic state of silver. When you talk about visibility, you pour the iron on and you start counting. I usually pour it on, catch a little off the plate. There's a little silver in there you can kind of use for it. Push it back on, leave a meniscus on. I put my cup up and I start counting. 1, 2, 3. In normal conditions, 3 to 4 seconds, you should start seeing the brightest part of your image come in. The highlights should appear in 3 to 4 seconds. You keep counting, you keep watching, and you have that solution on there and you're moving it around. 7 to 8 seconds, you should start seeing your midtones come in. Your midtones will, and again, this depends on temperature and what type of image you're mostly temperature, a little bit of humidity, but mostly temperature and how much restrainer and how your developer's made up. But if all things being equal, 3 to 4 seconds highlight, 7 to 8 seconds midtone, and then 10, 12 seconds, you should start seeing the shadows form, meaning not that there's anything in the shadows, but being able to see where the shadows are. Now, that's the visible part of it. One thing you're going to gain by using an NH4I or an ammonium iodide in your collodion and a proper developer, meaning the right amount of iron, the right amount of restrainer, and the right conditions and the right exposure, one thing you're going to gain using ammonium iodide is you're going to increase the contrast. So once you increase the contrast, it's going to be more distinctive to see that form. I've had people write me and say, I've never heard about this counting off and visibly watching the image come in. I pour it on and I shake it for 20 seconds or 30 seconds and I wash it and I fix it and see if there's anything there. Well, you're either underdeveloping or overdeveloping or doing something. There is a method to this methodology. There's a madness. The madness to this methodology is being able to see the highlights come in, the midtones, and then the shadows start forming and arrest that development. Stop it underwater. That means your correct exposure, you're not overdeveloping and you're not underdeveloping. And we talked about what overdeveloping does. Overdeveloping, if you don't have that methodology, you just pour it on and you guess. If you go too long, you develop the unexposed silver. So now you plug up all your void areas or your shadow areas. So now you've either got to wipe that off, or if you don't wipe it off and you're making a negative, you try to redevelop, you just plug up the whole image. It makes a flat, nasty positive and a terrible negative. So if you overdevelop, that's what happens. If you underdevelop, you have a weak image. There, just like we know what underdevelopment is, right? You don't have the information there. You haven't, it's still undeveloped. And so that methodology of being visual, being able to see the highlights, midtones, and the shadows starting to form, and then arresting that development will give you both the proper positives and even more so the proper negatives. You have a little more leeway in the positives because we're just using that reflected light. Negatives, you're printing, you're going through the glass. So your void or your shadow areas need to be pure glass, letting all that silver chloride get hit, and your highlights and midtones need to be gradation up from the zone, if you will, the zone effect. And so really important to be able to see that happen in the darkroom. The second part of that is having the proper illumination. You want to be able to read in your darkroom. I don't recommend yellow light anymore. I used to say it was okay. I'd only used it once. I had problems with it even then. I recommend good red light because you're in that nanometer range of 700 plus. And about any red light, you can go to your big box hardware store and buy the spiral LED red lights, and they work great. The red headlamps work great. Some of those yellow lights, while they illuminate well, they can fog or they can cause exposure on your plate. And there's just too wide a variance because yellow is below red. Yellow is in the 600 nanometer spectrum. So you're getting closer to what this process is sensitive to. So you run a little bit of a concern there. So that's the second part. The first part is chemical technique. And the second part is illumination, being able to actually see what you're doing. So keep those in mind. Keep all that in mind because it is important. It's very, obviously development. If everything else is right and you screw that up, it's all your chemistry, technique, exposure, scene, all that is for naught because you don't develop it right. You overdevelop or underdevelop. A lot of times people will underexpose the image and then push the development and have the veiling and scumming on the plate. Other times they'll overexpose the image and only develop it flashes right up. And so 5 or 8 seconds, they're pouring water on it. Both of those techniques do not produce what this process can give you. And I've said this many times. You see a lot of overexposed images online. Very few underexposed, but when, and maybe people want that mystery. And I've worked more on I'm kind of a Caravaggio guy. I like that high contrast. I've worked more on the darker side, right? The bright poppy images that are overexposed, they just damage that tonal range so much. I'd rather have an underexposed image develop properly and see a little bit of tonal range in that darker area versus the overexposed bright, everything's kind of blown out. But people love them. I see it all the time. People love those bright blown out images. And I think it's because the information is easy to see. The visuals are easy to see that way. So, but I don't know. Maybe somebody can talk about that. There you go, Paul. Paul just made my point in the chat there. He says, I found it much more difficult to develop visually with old workhorse. It's hard to see what's happening on the plate. And if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm not mistaken, that is a Ki solution. That is a potassium iodide solution. Am I right about that? I think I am. John says yes. Okay, good. I don't know all the names, and I'll say this publicly. Drew brought up a great question there about visually. That's an important part of it. But at the end of the day, these collodions mixed right, your exposure right, your technique right, are going to all produce good images. There's not a whole lot of difference. I mentioned the two differences, right? Shelf life and contrast or speed, right? Those are the differences. So you get all these different names and all this. You just have to say, hey, will I use this collodion up fast enough if I spend the money on it? Or can it sit on my shelf for a year and then I can still use it? Well, you pick your salt based on that. Am I making negatives? If you're making negatives, you'd probably definitely want to lean toward the ammonium iodide for that salt. The bromides, the bromides are responsible more for what I've noticed in landscapes, the greens and the green-yellow spectrum is really what the bromides. And the cadmium bromide in the collodion, it's a heavy metal, like we just talked about a minute ago. It's dangerous. But it gives some stability to the collodion as well. It stabilizes it quite well. Not that it's going to slow down your contrast build or turning, orange red. You're still going to have that heat and light exacerbate that oxidation of the iodides breaking down into iodine, turning red. That whole scenario, but it will stabilize it. It will, keep it balanced better. You won't have these radical fluctuations like using an ammonium bromide, or I've seen all kinds of stuff used. And it all works. Technically, it all works. It's just, I always say this, it depends on what you're after, right? And sometimes it's practical. Sometimes I only make 6 plates a year. Use a potassium iodide. Use a long shelf. Damn, use a cadmium iodide. It'll never change color on you. It'll stay straw yellow for years. But you're not going to get that. You're not going to make negatives with it necessarily, unless it's just an additive. But yeah, just experiment and find out what you like. John says, I love Old Workhorse. For some reason, that stuff will stick to a plate and drag through the mud. Never. Yeah, exactly. What's the recipe on that, John? What are the salts in it? I don't know off bat.
It is, let's see.
I've only experimented with it once, years.
0.8 of cadmium bromide, 0.7 of ammonium bromide, and 2.5 of potassium iodide.
Yeah. So look at what they're doing there, right? They want the stability of the cadmium, right? And they want a little added enhancement with the ammonium bromide, and then they have the Ki for shelf life, stability. So if you make Old Workhorse in January and you start making plates in March, beautiful. That's great. Let it just, that'd be great. I tend to, over the 20 years I've been in this game, I tend to make a batch of collodion up and make 50 plates, and the next thing you know, I'm making more collodion, right? So I use my stuff up fast. If you're not doing that, or you're not teaching or working commercially or doing projects or whatever, not using that stuff up, go with one of these. Go with one of the Ki collodions and get the shelf life out of that stuff. It's expensive, right? Who wants an $80 bottle of collodion sitting on your shelf turning blood red that you can't see through, and you don't make negatives, and now you have 500 milliliters or 1,000 milliliters of ripening juice that'll last you, 10 or 15 years. So yeah, depending on your needs, and most people are practical. They want to save money, but still produce good plates. Just think it out. I'll tell you this, you're not going to produce beautiful tonal range plates with a brand new, fresh collodion batch using Ki. You're just not going to. It doesn't have time to ripen, to break that iodide. It's resistant, right? That's why it falls out of solution. It's not soluble in solvents. That's why you get that layer, that cake of iodide in the bottom. That's why you have to decant it off the top, right? And sometimes it'll take a week to even clear that fogginess out of it, right? It's suspended in that. You can still use it. You can still make plates with that foggy stuff, but you're just not going to get that range. And especially, you're not going to be making negatives as good as negatives as you could with the proper iodide. Iodide is the key, right? That's when we talk about salts, bromides. have a couple of variants, but iodide is the key to this thing. So when we talk about salts and solvents and collodion, making that working photographic mixture, we're really talking about the iodide that you use in the collodion, and it's important. And again, base it on what you're doing, how you're working, how fast you're working, what variant you're using. Are you doing exclusively positives? Are you making negatives too? Think that through, because it'll save you time, money, and really overall, you're improving the potential of making the best plate you can. You know, you can still make crappy plates with the best chemistry. It doesn't matter, right? You can still make really terrible plates with good chemistry. Don't get me wrong there. Everybody wants this magic bullet. If I buy this type of camera and buy this chemistry, will I make great plates? No, that's not where it comes from. It comes from experience, practice, and working through that. So, but a good camera and good chemistry will advance you along the way. So when your potentials reach, you can make those optimal plates. I've seen people work in negatives and everything's perfect, but their chemistry's off. Their technique is good, their methodology is good, but their chemistry's off. Then I've seen people working in negatives where their technique is, their chemistry is perfect and their technique and methodology is poor. And it produces the same results, right? And why I say negatives is because that's a little more demanding. Like I said, in positives, you can kind of fudge and get away with things. I mean, people post stuff online and people love it, and there's nothing wrong with it. I'm talking strictly in the technical sense. People post way overexposed ambrotypes and technically way off and just an absolute mess. And people love them, and I understand that. But in a strict technical sense, if you want to exploit the process for what it can give you and make technically the highest quality image you can, your chemistry and your technique and methodology need to marry up just perfectly for it to happen. And your gear plays a role too, right? Your optics, your light, your optics, your chemistry, and your methodology. That's what you really want to concentrate on. If one or more of those are off, you're gonna be deficient. You're not maximizing it, right? You're not potentially. What you want to do is you want to set yourself up, and things happen. Even if everything's perfect, things happen and can go wrong. But you want to set yourself up. If you're going to invest the time, the money, the energy, you want to set yourself up to be able to make the maximum quality of plate that you can, given the circumstances. And so if any of those things are off, you lower your odds of that happening. And wet collodion, I don't care who works in it, it's always a crapshoot. It's always a crapshoot to some degree, right? It's a roll of the dice, which makes it exciting for one thing, right? A little bit. I mean, you can gain a lot of control, but you've got to realize that you don't have complete control in this process. You just don't. Sally Mann says every time she pours a plate, she prays for the angels of serendipity, right? So there's a lot of that going on. But we can, to the best of our ability, understand the process, set ourselves up with gear and chemistry and methodology to make the best possible image you can. And what you're talking about there mostly is probably in a commercial environment. If you're making plates in a portrait studio or reenactor scene or whatever you're doing that you're charging plates for, people want a certain quality. If you're making personal artwork, you have a lot more liberty, right? You can have those artifacts. You can be off a little on your exposure, your development, things like that. But the idea is to have control over it and say, this is what I want to make and this is what I'm trying to achieve. So yeah, a lot of a lot of serendipity, Sally Mann again, a lot of chance, but a lot of control too. And the more you do this, you're going to look back and you say, God, when I first started, I was shaking and nervous and oh my God, something appeared on the plate and blah, 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 and then you do it for a few years and you're like, for me, I'm just like, I guess you'd call a little obsessive or a little bit of a perfectionist, or, I just want to climb that up. I just want to ratchet that up. I did that. Let's see if I can do that, So the technical and the geeky side of me wants to improve the quality of the plates. And the other side of me wants to kind of let that the process happen. And it will regardless. You like I said, I don't care who you are. You can say you have control over it. I'll give you situations where you don't, I guarantee you. So be open to that. That's really the moral of that rant or that story. What else do we have? Let me see over here. I have to look in both places. There you go. Oh, John said in hot climates he uses ammonium nitrate in water to cool plates for development. There you go. Awesome. Thanks for that. Yeah, this is great. I love being able to people coming in and sharing information. God knows I don't know.
Quinn, I don't do that. I just found that in an 1899 book.
Oh, there you go. Well, fair enough.
Either he bought it for maybe that, maybe he saw that, maybe he wanted to make front surface mirrors. But I do the same thing. I'll at 2 a.m. I order all the craziest stuff, and when I'm doing inventory, it's like, what the hell did I buy this for?
6 or 7 beers later, you're on the chemistry store ordering. Yeah. Front surface mirror.
That's exactly what happened. Exactly what happened.
Yeah. There you. Fair enough.
Good.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, here in Colorado, cannabis is legal. So people puff up and then they say the next day all of a sudden they have 16 Amazon orders they can't remember ordering, you know? So it happens, right? One of the Johns just mentioned a front surface mirror, FSM. That's what I call it. And people often ask this too. They say, what do you mean front surface mirror? What do you mean by that? Well, it's a technique. It's in my book. If you have my book, look in chapter 7. It's under the substrate section. Front surface mirror is mirror that doesn't have the glass over it. It's the same thing in your digital SLR, your film camera, the little mirror that pops up to make the thing you look through, your prism. That's front surface mirror. There's no glass over it. A mirror with glass, it would be like your bathroom mirror, or a traditional mirror. This is front surface mirror, has no glass over it. And what I call them faux daguerreotypes. They're fake daguerreotypes, making positives. And the thinner you make these, you reduce the exposure a little bit, the better looking the plate is, right? So if you make a positive on the front surface mirror, underexpose it a little bit, and then reflect it against something black, they're amazing looking. I've almost fooled people with them before about, is that a daguerreotype? Man, look at that. That's a 5x7 daguerreotype. No, that's a front surface mirror faux dag. It's a positive collodion image. Yeah, so there's a lot of substrate, right? What substrate can we use in this? That's one that people don't talk about a lot. We usually talk about, glass, black glass, clear glass. We talk about plastic or plexiglass. You can make any color, any variety. But we don't really talk a lot about front surface mirror, and we don't talk about stainless steel. Stainless steel is another material you can use to make positive images on. They're kind of bizarre, but what is it when we talk about what material you can make images on? Well, and there's caveats to this, but generally speaking, you can't put anything in your silver nitrate bath that's going to interact with the silver nitrate, because that'll corrode and corrupt instantly. That's a corrosive. It'll just tear up things, and then your bath is ruined. So plastic and glass, stainless steel, mirror, glass, mirrors, glass, that kind of thing, are innocuous. Aluminum, for the most part, we use the alumitypes or the tin types, modern tin types, if you will. They all are innocuous to your silver bath, meaning they won't disturb, they won't change the pH, they won't change the amount of silver, and they won't disrupt or pollute or ruin your silver bath. And I've seen people try to put wooden plates. They put collodion on all kinds of different plastic. Some of the plastic material you have to watch for too. Some things that will off gas in response to the silver nitrate. You've got to watch those things because, like talked about earlier, the intensification, silver nitrate being expensive. You ruin a half a liter of silver nitrate. That's $60 to $110, $120, depending on how much you bought the silver for at the time. And you can, most of the time, you can recover those baths, but it's just more time and money. And why do you want to put stuff in your silver bath that doesn't belong there? So watch your substrate. It's really important that you don't, if you're just starting out, use a traditional glass, use a traditional alumitype or tin type material, the anodized aluminum, or black plastic or clear plastic, whatever you're doing. I've used plexiglass with great success. It's a lot like black glass. It's got that heavy sheen and heavy reflection, and that's really what you want on positives, right? To make a good looking positive. But God, you hold a plastic photograph. There's just something kind of weird about that to me. It's like, it looks good, just don't touch it. What is this stuff? Oh, it's plexiglass, really. And I made negatives on thin plexiglass too, which work well as, they don't break either. But I guess there's a part of me that's kind of a traditionalist in the sense when I make work and I talk about, people want to say, oh, that's a print from what? That's a print from a wet collodion negative, made on glass, and being able to talk about the materials is as important to me as the actual photograph, because at the end of the day, if you show your work or sell your work, people that invest their money in it will want to know how it's made, why it's made, how it's made. And sometimes, oh, that's a plastic negative that I made. Maybe that's appropriate. Maybe that would work great for some project. I'm not saying there's anything right or wrong here. I'm just saying that traditionally, for me, I've always liked to be able to say that's an albumin print from a glass wet collodion negative, and just kind of leave it historically accurate that way. Not me too. Yes.
One thing we had a problem with, and anybody listening, if they do want to try plexiglass, we haven't been able to find a plexiglass that doesn't block UV in any way, shape, or form. When Christine does classes, does her kids' classes, we tried to use plexiglass for making the contact frames, and just blocks the hell out of it. So people are going to have a problem if they maybe try negatives. I don't know.
Good point. Excellent point, John. Thanks for sharing that. That is true. It's called transmission rate. You'll see this in glass as well too. I think John, the other John here, John in New Mexico, we talked about glasses. I talked about the 1.5 mil that I got from the dry plate guy. I can't remember his name now. I'm terrible with names. I think he's in New Hampshire. He makes the dry plates. Jason Lane, the J Lane plates. I just bought glass off of him, and then he gave me resources. You can get that glass with transmission rates as high as 98% UV. So, and the material size, the transmission rate, what allows, how much UV allowed to go through it. I would imagine in most scenarios, people putting glass in their homes, people putting plastic, they just want the light and they don't want the UV, because we know what UV does. So if you sit next to one of my windows here and try to make a photograph with the window shut, you're not doing it. It's blocking like 90% of the UV. Your 4-second exposure with the open window would turn into 40 seconds with the closed window, and wouldn't be that good either. So that's a very good point. Watch those transmission, how much UV that a particular substrate lets through if you're making negatives. I remember I taught a couple of courses in Berlin, Germany, and at the studio that we were working in, the woman that had the studio said, wow, I just tried to make a positive over here, set the guy down right next to the window, bounced light on the other shadow side, and it was a minute and a half. Nothing showed up on the plate. And I walked over and I opened the window up. We made another plate, and it was like a 3 or 4 second exposure. And so I always say now, and again, this is in my book, I take a paper towel, take my silver bath, just put a little spot of silver on the paper towel and set it next to the window. If it doesn't start turning pink and brown in 30 or 40 seconds, you've got a heavily UV blocked glass or window there. If it starts turning brown or pink in a few seconds, you've got a lot of UV coming through. It's just a little UV test you can run and see if that particular window or glass or material, plastic, whatever it is letting UV through. Because we want the strongest UV we can get. We're down in the 350 to 400 nanometer. We're way down there in the violet and past and into the UV literally. So really important to remember that, because it can be frustrating for people saying, God, why? I'm right next to this light. I can see the light. Yeah, you can see it, but the collodion can't see it, right? So it's like working in a dark room. You can't. The collodion isn't going to respond. Collodion responds to light, most light that you can't see. It responds the most to light you can't see. In other words, you can't see UV. So that's why when people say, why can't we use a light meter? Because your light meter isn't going to respond to UV. unless you have a UV light meter, right? And then, and your ISO is probably only going to go down to ISO 3 on a light meter. You're working in a different world with wet collodion, so you need to adjust, and you need to see the way collodion sees, and what you don't see, know that collodion sees. A lot of it's going to be the same, right? You're going to see the highlights, you're going to see, you know, the shadow areas, they're going to respond the same, but colors, the type of light, the type of material you're using to pull the light in, all those things, going to make a big difference that way. What else do we have? Black and white paper. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, you guys, we should do that. We should set up when I get settled back again, I'll throw out a little email or a post or something, and we should have people come in and talk about their processes. If you're doing paper prints or you're doing whatever, you know, just kind of open it up a little bit. Collodion, wet collodion will always come back around. People want to know about wet collodion always. I mean, it's not like we're not going to talk about wet collodion. And bring your questions. I don't often say this, but bring your questions in for the technical side of it, because if I don't know it, somebody in here will be able to help or have experience with it. But on the wet collodion end, I feel like most questions are questions that's been asked in the past and have pretty good answers to, whether in an art environment or a commercial environment. So yeah.
And I've got something. It's kind of going back to the Rollins stuff.
Yeah, please.
So after a little while ago, I did just a trial pour on a 17 by 23 piece of glass, 17 inch by 23 inch.
Wow.
Big piece, but I wanted to check it out and see what would happen with the gelatin. It was just a purely experimental kind of thing.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure about the shrinkage and all that. It definitely shrank down in some places almost 2 inches from the edge, but and that was with an 8% pour.
Okay.
Now, and I think it took about, what was it, 100 milliliters, somewhere around there, to pour that one.
Okay.
It was a good amount.
I'd have to do the square inches in time. I think I used 0.96, but it sounds right.
Yeah, it was close. So my question is, when you finally go back with the potassium or ammonium dichromate and, you know, wet it down, how dry do you want it to be on that glass before you do it? Do you want to be able to tap your nail against it, and it's going to be as hard as the glass? You're going to be able to see right through it, right? It's got to be
exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
And so that's what I want to check. So do you ever do like 2 pours, like do one and then let it dry down and then do another one on top of that? Because I've read other Rollins stuff where they do 2 or even 3 pours.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out, like, is that a good idea, especially for like maybe the larger glass prints?
Well, those are great questions. My methodology is I use a higher percentage of gelatin and pour once. But yes, people do float papers in weak solutions 2 or 3 times, let them dry. Yes, you can do that. You could cut that down and do that. The other portion of it is when you brush on or pour on whatever you do, your dichromate, when it's wet, it's not sensitive. When it dries and you want it bone dry, the old literature says bone dry, that is 3 to 4 times as sensitive as a pot print. Right. But when it's wet or damp, and especially when you're talking about you're swelling that gelatin just a little bit. That's why you don't want to get those marks. You want to get it on and then leave it alone and let it bone dry. I found that the prints on glass, the gelatin, the dichromate on glass, obviously dries so much faster than paper, right? And you don't have to stretch it out. I did 16 by 20 oil prints a few years ago, and I had to bar them up and clamp them because it just totally wrecked the paper.
Yeah, it does. I don't like that.
Yeah. But glass, you should be able to strip that glass off, do your math, pour out 500-600 whatever mils it is on that, leave it, pull them off, and let that dry, bone dry gelatin, and then use your dichromate. Do your math again. Use your dichromate. Just get it on, stand off, put it in a dark area, let it bone dry, put your negative emulsion to emulsion, and print it out. That's what you should be able to.
Okay.
It should. And you shouldn't have shrinkage like that.
Yeah, it came in from the sides. I swear it was like 1 to 2 inches. Over time, it just shrunk all the way in from the side. So I wasn't sure what was causing that, or if you had seen that on your own. But I also don't know if it's because you were doing smaller plates. Have you tried a large plate like that?
I did 16 by 20 prints, oil prints on paper, not glass.
Oh, right. So
but glass should be even better, though. Glass, right. If you strip it off and you pour that gelatin up and you have a mil or a mil and a half of gelatin evenly around the plate, and then you pull your strips off and it holds that, I can see drying down flat here, and then your center staying wet and bulbous.
Right.
If the gelatin is still wet in the center, I could see that.
But
yeah, you should be good and flat all the way across the glass.
It was, but then it kind of shrank. It made a really smooth transition from the actual glass up onto the edge of the gelatin, then all the way in. It was really smooth. It's kind of wild. So it's like it all kind of shrank together. So, do you ever go higher than 8% on your gelatin, or do you ever go like 10 or 12% or anything?
I use 10% on carbon tissues. You could, if you wanted to, you could use, you could try that may. You might want to go opposite, like you said. You might want to do a 4% and do 2 of them, or you might want to do a 4%, and if you can get a good matrix off 4%, go for it.
And I also got alum, right? Because I heard it's good for the post. But would you mix this with the gelatin before you pour?
Yes.
Or would you want to do a quick bath in it after you pour and kind of let it dry, like super dry it, and then do kind of a quick coating with it or something like that?
No. What I do now, first off, the alum is to stiffen that. It'll make the gelatin dry harder, right? It'll stiffen that gelatin up. So the alum, it kind of, on glass, you don't have to worry about it at all. If you use too much, you can break the gelatin, right? It'll get so damn stiff, you'll break it. But on glass, you don't have to worry about that. And in carbon, we use sugar as a plasticizer, so you don't have to worry about that. But I usually use, if I remember correctly, I use 1 gram for 1 liter of gelatin, 8% gelatin of alum. And I mix it in when that's melted and heated, and I stirred it up, I put the alum in. And then I put the alcohol. I do the 25 mils of alcohol in a liter. So that is through the solution. But that's after that you want that gelatin that stiff. That will help you in inking as well too.
Right.
The stiffer that'll help you in inking, and you won't bubble and break that stuff. So yeah, alum is great, and thiamol. If you're not going to use your gelatin for a while, throw some thiamol in there and keep the bacteria from growing on it.
Is citric acid a good, just a couple of teaspoons of citric acid when you first make up your gelatin, a good idea?
I wouldn't use that.
No.
Okay. I wouldn't use citric acid. For a preservative, I'd use thiamol. Citric acid will have some other effects that you probably wouldn't want in your gelatin.
Gotcha. Okay.
Unless you're going to put some lime in there and eat a little bit.
Nah. Maybe, I don't know.
I use thiamol all the time. But something I read a long time ago, you might want to look on either the Google Books or Photrio or whatever it is. I seem to remember people having a shrinkage problem with gelatin on glass, and it was a humidity related issue. And with you being in New Mexico, maybe build a humidity box or something that brings it down a lot slower.
Okay.
Might be a thought.
That's a good point.
The humidity here right now today, I think we're at about 19%, something like that. So yeah, that's a good point, John. That sounds like to me a water problem, right? Where you have flat 2 inches in, and then you have a bulbous. You should dry evenly across. I haven't had any. I mean, we're probably the same as John in New Mexico here. We're probably 16 or 18% humidity today. Well, it's kind of overcast today. It might be a little higher, but I live in a high dry desert here. So, and I hadn't had any problems with that with paper, and did 16 by 20. No problems with that way. But, experiment and see. I found glass, man, the dichromate's clear. Obviously, the dichromate's clear out of glass so much faster than paper.
And different papers clear quicker too. You know, it just depends on how much they absorb, how long you go with it. But glass is just, you know, I was looking at those glass prints the other day before I packed them, and I am just enamored with Rollins oil on glass. It's just like the absolute ultimate for me right now in my mind of what I want to do. It's the ultimate process. And I've had fewer problems with glass than using paper in the Rollins oil process. Just little things that I don't have to watch for in glass. Like in paper, if you're washing the dichromate out, I have to watch the time because you can overswell that gelatin, bubble up and pop it. You can, you know, glass, I don't worry. It's clear. The glass clears so fast, the dichromate's out of the gelatin on glass so fast, that's almost like by the time I'm done tidying up, I can pull the plate out and I'm ready to ink it up. It's swollen. It's got a nice matrix. It's got a great relief on it. And so, yeah, I experiment with those and come in and share what you find out. Samuel asked about dry plates. Is there any way besides tannic acid for dry plates? And can you store dry plates on each other or do they get damaged? Dry plates, there's gelatin dry plates, right? The bromide, the film on glass, right? The tannic acid is really great for collodion dry plate. It's collodion dry plates is what we're talking about. And what that is you go through the whole process. And I don't know why people think collodion dry plates. I mean, if you do wet collodion, and especially if you do wet collodion negatives, not that that has anything, just exposure-wise and thinking that way. If you do the wet collodion process, you can easily do wet collodion negatives. All you need is the tannic acid and a little extra alcohol. And basically all it is you're sealing up, after it comes out of the silver bath, you're basically going to use a bath of distilled water, tannic acid bath. And then in lay terms, what that tannic acid bath is going to do is going to seal the silver up in the collodion. You're going to let those plates dry and they'll be like film. I mean, you'll be able to store them away. You do not want to store them on top of one another. No, you never. And in fact, even with an interleave, even with paper or something, you wouldn't want that. You'd want plate racks. People ask how I store my plates. Everything that went out of this studio down here is in a plate rack, right? I mean, that's how you store plates. You never want them touching. You never want them weighted. Well, in some cases, you probably could. If they're really cured, varnished and cured, you could probably get away with that. But sensitive dry collodion plates need to be stored in a nice light tight box and ready to expose. And they're good forever. The downside with wet dry collodion negatives or dry collodion plates is the ISO, the exposure is going to be so long. You're going to be outside normally. I have done a portrait on collodion dry plate, but it was several minutes. But the downside of that is you're going to have to experiment with the exposure, and then you're going to you'd never be able to use them inside in a studio. But you don't have to take your darkroom with you, right? You don't, if you're doing landscapes or something. There's some real good upsides to that, and it takes some proficiency to get good at them. My theory has always been there's an aesthetic to wet collodion that dry plates, collodion or gelatin, it doesn't matter, that dry plates just can't. If I wanted to do that, I'd probably just use film, just use traditional film, gelatin film. And I think it's neat. People can make their gelatin plates and all that. But there's an aesthetic to the wet collodion process that you can't achieve with dry plates. It's just something you can't achieve with those other processes. And again, there's reasons why we choose what we choose. Yeah, there you go. John's just recommending the homebrew stores, and yeah, lab grade, same thing. Yeah, you can use lab grade or a food grade gelatin too for Rollins oil prints. I just found the photo blooms a little more, but all of these are set. There's some kitchen photo book out there. I used to have it. I don't know what's happened to it, but maybe I still have it. But the kitchen cookbook, photo book or something, using all kinds of stuff out of your kitchen to substitute for making photographs. So there's a lot of products that we can use in photography, especially the late 19th century and early 20th century photography that we can use directly out of our kitchen. Tannic acid, not that you have tannic acid in your kitchen, but gelatin, tannic acid, you don't ever have to, in very rare circumstances, do you ever have to use lab grade stuff for anything or reagent grade. You can always use technical grade or lower for stuff. Yeah, but yeah, dry plates are fun. They're fun. I've never seen them really catch on very well. I think most people prefer just using film. John Graybill, a friend of mine, he's Edward Curtis's great grandson. That's where I got a Curtis print, and I've got the other big one, Mosey, from another friend of mine that does Curtis work. But John Graybill is using in his Descendants project, he's using the J Lane dry plates to do that work. He's doing portraits of descendants of Edward Curtis, Native Americans that Edward Curtis photographed. He's photographing their descendants now, and he's using dry plates. And he came up, did a workshop here, and we made pop prints of his dry plates. They're beautiful. They're gorgeous. They're just absolutely stunning. So when we talk about processes and things, there's no right or wrong answer. You could produce really nice work with anything, digital to dry plates to collodion to whatever. I mean, obviously, it's based on content and context and intention and narrative. To me, all those things. That's what really makes. And then it's technical, of course. Well executed. You can make great photographs in any process. That's the idea, right? We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, you only use wet collodion. No, you use what's proper. You use what, I mean, I always say, I don't think Hemingway, anybody ever asked Ernest Hemingway what kind of typewriter he used to write Old Man on the Sea, right? Who cares what kind of typewriter he used? We care that he wrote that novel, right? So and then on the other side of my mouth, I do use the process to inform the work, but it supports the work. It's not a process on its own. It's not the work is cool because it's made in wet collodion. No, the work should be good because it's supported and is supported both visually and technically and semantically, verbiage wise. So it's not that the process doesn't matter. It's just that the process shouldn't take precedence, and you shouldn't ride out work just because it's made with gum bichromates, and who cares what the work is, or it's made in platinum palladium, who cares what the work is, or wet collodion, who cares what the work is. That you're a process photographer at that point. You're not really a storyteller and artist. You need to turn that around and have that support that work, so to speak. Samuel says, have you made carbon transfer prints? Yes, sir, I have. I have indeed made carbon transfer prints. And you know what I found in carbon? I love carbon on glass. And I've shown transfers on glass. I think they're on Facebook if you look through, or on my blog. Cemetery shot that I did on glass and I held up to the light. I had a great idea with making, I think this would be cool. What was the show that we watched? We pack and then we watch like Netflix or whatever in the evenings, and we watched a series called, what was it? It was a Western, and it was a long series. But in that series, there were these two Irish blokes that had glass show that they charged 5 cents, and you go in and they'd pull the slide out of the glass lantern. They had a little candle burning in the back, and they put the glass slide in. They project up the scenes of Ireland kind of thing, right? Hand-colored slides. And years ago, I thought, wow, it'd be so cool. Talking about process photography, right? Now I'm going to say this. It would be so cool to make little, maybe 4x4, maybe, I don't know, 10 to 15 centimeter square plates of carbon transfers, and put them in a glass lantern slide, and have a little fiddle or mandolin or some live music playing, and do a glass slideshow and a magic lantern show. Wouldn't that, just historically, right? Get some content and just let people experience the sound, the live sound, the visuals by candlelight, pull the slide out, put the slide in. I wish I could remember the name of that show, but that was it got me thinking about that again. When I was down in Denver, I had a studio downtown Denver, and had a studio down there for a couple of years. And every Friday night it was pretty much all year. Every Friday night would have what's called gallery strolls, and people in the community come out. Man, some Friday nights we'd just pack that studio, and it was a big studio, and we'd have people wall to wall in there, hang work, do demonstrations, talk about that. And that's what got me thinking about a magic lantern show. Have live music, just acoustic, and some carbon transfers on glass would just be absolutely stunning.
Quinn, if you can find the right people to make it, they did it 2 years ago at a Wild West event in Pennsylvania. Now they had
what did they do?
It was a makeshift little magic lantern that they made, and they had these slides they made, but they printed them on laser paper, so it wasn't very good. But they brought the I think the theme was the seven wonders of the world.
Okay, that's what this was too. They had some of that in there.
Maybe that's where they pulled it from.
Yeah, maybe so. That's interesting. And the magic lanterns are really easy. Just put a nice, bright, fast Petzval lens on it, and it just enhances the image anyway, right? You get that swirl and everything on them. I mean, it's just the whole experience. I think that would be cool to do, And if you could put a show together.
We've been trying to build one from pieces we find on eBay. But I'm not the kind of, I'm not the showman that can really put a show on like these guys did. It was funny. It was great.
Wow. Well, that sounds incredible. I've wanted to do that for a while. It's just thinking and talking now, to put context to it, it would be really cool to have pick a theme and have people from all over the world send you a slide and do a slideshow like that. Kareem has a great studio. Maybe we could do it in Istanbul sometime. That'd be fun. And I've seen magic lantern machines or units on, and this was years ago, but I've seen them on eBay. I saw them for sale on eBay before. The actual machine, I think, a couple of them had lenses, but I'd get a good Petzval magic lantern slide lens, the optic. They're easy to get. They're easy to find. And have the candle in the back, and just, man, that would be so cool.
The good ones are really expensive. They've got a lot of the kids ones. The good ones are expensive, but we've been trying to piece it together. We've got the burner for one. It's actually 3 2-inch wicks for kerosene because they need a lot of light.
Wow, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, it's we're probably going to need to make our own, but
that's cool, man. Do it.
It hasn't worked, but absolutely to be able to make those magic lantern slides. The only problem is how would you harden the carbon on the glass and just make sure it just doesn't melt at all?
That's an interesting proposition. You may end up doing. You may end up doing hand-colored positive ambrotypes, and varnish. Do a good hard varnish on it, of course. And even then, you're probably right about the gelatin, depending on how far the heat source is from it, right? But yeah, it wouldn't. You're right about the gelatin. It probably wouldn't take. Maybe I add some extra.
Use LED lights.
The what?
Use LED lights.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And an electronica band. No, it'd be a fun community project to put together and do a magic lantern show with a theme and have people make little slides they could send in and have photographers, historic process photographers making slides all over the world. Maybe it's your community. Maybe it's your part of the world. In the 19th century, these two Irish blokes were showing their home country, and then they'd show the Egyptian pyramids, and then that kind of stuff, the big wonders of the world. You pay a nickel to get in and you see it. But it would be so cool to have a nice studio place set up and have people come in and experience both the process of how these are made, the content of them, and just the whole vibe, because we're so virtual now. And God knows if, maybe this would never happen now, but if we ever can get together again, that would be cool to do. That's what I'm saying. But you're right about the gelatin, John. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, the heat source. But maybe that's what you do. Maybe you forego the original light source and just do the like Kareem said, just do the LEDs. That you know, hey, we can fudge a little bit, right? I mean, it's the
You wouldn't see it. It will be inside the body, so nobody would see it.
No, nobody would see it. You could have the 5600 Kelvin light balance rather than the 3300 degree Kelvin from the warm light, you know. But you may want to do a 3300 Kelvin LED on it, you know, to give that experience. It would be the optic and the slide that would give the quality of the image, of course. And then you could do them carbon, you could do wet plate, you could do anything as long as they're clear glass. And I would probably say they wouldn't have to be colored either. You could just do, you know, just do. I mean, that's an idea. I'm going to keep that in mind.
I had bought one magic lantern just for the lens a couple of years ago. I should have kept it. I just took the lens and because it was not in a good condition.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can find them. They're Petsful.
Yeah, I can still find them.
Yeah, they're out there. They're quite. In fact, people don't like to use them for wet collodion. They're fast, but the fall off is so extreme. They look like they've got Vaseline rubbed around the edges of them. Samuel said, "Could you varnish a carbon printer?" Yes, you could. Actually, you could. That's another good point. You could varnish them, and I'm just wondering, even varnish. John brings up a good point. Gelatin has such a low melting point that you could have. You know what? Let me see if I can find. I want to show you guys this because I want to show it to you. I want to show you my carbon on glass. I think I have it available that I can share real quick. I love it. Get these crazy process ideas going. Carbon. Let's find out where I think. See how good I'm at it storing my stuff here. Ha 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 ha! I found it. And let's see. Share my screen. Where's my share? Let's see. John's share screen. Here we go. Application one, Chrome tab. Search results, Google Drive. Can you guys see that? See if I can zoom it in. Look at the color on that. Go down. How do I scroll that? There we go. Oh, here's a carbon on paper. Carbon on glass. Here's a detailed shot of. There it is. And that's probably. It looks like it's on 8x10.
Gorgeous.
But man, that color is just, yeah. I just love it. So carbon on glass. You can. I'm a big fan of glass. I love glass. So carbon on glass works really well.
What subbing did you use on that, Quinn?
Nothing, believe it or not.
Wow.
Nothing. I know. I didn't use any subbing on that. Yes, and Samuel said, I remember that negative from your books. Look, it's an old cemetery in Käfertal, Germany, Käfertal, Deutschland. Went into the cemetery, made that negative. There's a video up somewhere. You can watch me make that negative. But I thought, wow, this is a good dense negative. I want to try a carbon on glass, transferred beautifully. Just it was, again, that experience of working with glass is so nice. But yeah, it's fun. Yeah, there are even electric candles that imitate real ones. Yeah, just get the color balance. What came to my mind was that slide that I just showed you. Lost my train of thought. That slide that the color of it, that warm, I'd only printed carbon on glass, transferred it on paper, or transferred it onto paper before. And that when that glass came out and it was just that, it's that legitimate color. I did nothing to that image. It's that warm, beautiful, and that's using the Black Cat India ink in the tissue too. I mean, it's just, I don't know if it's glass, a particular negative. I don't know what it was, but it's just got a beautiful color. Yes, I'll find the name of that show too. Transverse ceramic pigment, do the glass. Yeah, God, you could do that too. Yeah, there's so many options. When we get back on board, we'll organize something where we can come in and share some of the stuff we've been working on, whether it's real life or if you have digital copies or whatever you can share on here. And we'll start sharing some work around. And maybe at some point we should talk about making some glass slides and doing a little show that way. I think that would be fun. I think that would just, you know, I'm an educator. I consider myself an educator. I consider myself an artist who educates, but it's the whole idea of sharing the work of a group that's interested in something, that has some context to it, that has some meaning, and then has both historical and contemporary context to it, and just educating people like, wow, this can be done, especially in our digital phone, clicking, this kind of stuff age. We're doing physical glass plates and doing a magic lantern show. I'll find the name of that show. John says the whole relief and now talking about ceramic is me thinking lithophanes, yeah, which are different thickness ceramic back show image. Yep. That'd be interesting. That'd be interesting to see if that would hold up. You're right. All right, guys, I think we'll, let me, you know what? So I don't forget, let me see if I can just find the name of that show. If you guys are interested, and if you have Netflix, we don't have cable TV anymore. So we just watch Netflix, and I know I've got it on here.
Is rather good.
Let's see where, I don't know the history. My wife would know the name of it too. My list. Here it is. I'll find it here. God, it was good too. It was about the railroad. Marco Polo. It was about the 19th century, the railroad coming through the West. Mossad, where is that? God, I should know the name of it. I don't know why I don't. I'm not able to. My brain is only so big. I can only hold so much in my head. So I don't think I'm passing it up. Legend, Narcos, Laws. Wow, yeah. I'll ask my wife.
Hell on Wheels?
Yes, Hell on Wheels. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. Hell on Wheels, guys.
Yes.
If you have Netflix, you should watch that. And the two Irish guys in there have a magic lantern show, slideshow in there. And that's it just brought my mind back to that. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I greatly appreciate it. I am off for a little while. We'll be up on the mountain. The next one you'll see, I'll be outside in the mountains, in the Rocky Mountains, and we'll get together and see if we can't have a little show and talk about some things. Thank you so much for your support. I greatly appreciate it. I want to acknowledge people who have bought my book. I sold my last one this morning to France, and I just thank you. I greatly appreciate that. I don't have anything else to sell other the standard editions up on Amazon. I put my videos on demand. If you don't want the book, you just want the videos, they're up there. But just, I thank you. That's the biggest thing. I don't like to beg for money or anything, but I just really appreciate your support buying my book. And I hope it's helpful. And I hope these videos can continue and we continue to make good, interesting content, and people can watch these and get something from them, even if it's superficial. But next time, bring your technical questions. I'll announce when I can do another show from my trailer on in the mountains, and we'll get together then. Stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you very much. Have a great weekend, a great evening. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.